Hello everyone, my name is Naguura, and today I'm going to be talking about the new affixes that Blizzard posted and announced, and they also put it on the PTR. So I did manage to go and test all of these new affixes, and I'm excited to show you what they do, and I'm going to be giving you my opinion on them as well. I would love to hear your opinion on them as well, so don't hesitate to leave feedback in the comments below. Okay, so the first affix I tested was Entangled. Entangled was the affix that people were the most worried about because the way the tooltip read was definitely like a lot more scary than it actually ended up being. It basically said it's rooting you, and you know, when something roots you in place in an plus dungeon, that sounds horrible. But the way it turned out to be is that once in a while, you will get some sort of like vine spawn underneath your character that you are attached to with like a vine. And you have to walk 10 yards away for it to break. But the good thing is that you can actually also break it by just using anything that will remove a slow. So if you have anything in your class tree, any buff, any ability that gets rid of slows, you will automatically break the vine without having to move the 10 yards away. So I tested this affix. Now, obviously as a tank druid, it's a little bit awkward because you don't necessarily want to shapeshift out of bear form. Here in this first one, I was just walking away, and you can see I actually reacted a little bit slowly here. I didn't immediately walk, and I still managed to walk out of it in time. It's 8 seconds that you have to walk out of it, so it's not horrible. Now you can see it will spawn here in a second. All right, there we go. So it spawns. I didn't react until 4 seconds left. Then I reacted and I still managed to break it. So it's not absolutely horrible, even if you do not have something that gets rid of slow. If you have something that gets rid of slow, then of course it's very easy. You just use stability and you're gonna be fine. It seems to be happening on every person simultaneously in your group. And I'm not sure yet if it's on a timer or if it's like random. It only happens when you're in combat, so it's not like quaking. Now, I think shapeshifted out of it once. I think the next one that happened I shapeshifted out of, so I'll show you how that looks like. Okay, there we go. So it got applied here. I'm shapeshifting in a second. And it's gone. Now, I did move as well 10 yards away approximately, but it does work. I've tested it multiple times. Yeah, this affix, in my opinion, is not horrible. Could cause problems if you don't have a heads up that it's gonna happen. Like if we do not have an actual timer for it somewhere, and we don't know, like if it's random how many times it happens, then it can be annoying if it overlaps with something where you have to move fast. So if I have to move fast out of something and then I get slowed by 50%, you know, something could happen and it could go wrong. One more thing that I wish they would do is change the visual of it a little bit, because it's actually hard to see sometimes if you're in melee range, if there's lots of mobs on top of you, if there's other animations around you, it's really hard to see. So I wish there was some sort of better audio cue. Like when you stand in Sanguine, I believe your screen is like going red on the sides. So maybe when this vine happened, your screen should go green on the side, or maybe there's like a better, like a voice line or something like that. So of course you can also just have a weak aura for it, because there is a debuff on your character as soon as it gets applied. So you can have a weak aura with an air horn or whatever, so you instantly know. But it would be better if Blizzard just makes something by default, so people are not reliant on weak auras, because they don't want that to be a thing. So I hope they can fix that. All right, so my impression of Entangled is it's okay. It's not obvious, like it's obviously not something that is necessarily super engaging. For me personally, affixes are good if you have to play around them, but not in like a super annoying and constant way. And if you can never get like screwed by the affix, right? If there's sometimes a situation where I cannot handle the affix and the trash mechanics or the boss mechanics simultaneously, that's just not a good affix then, right? Like quaking, for example. Sometimes you just have to stack up or you have to do this. And if you cannot deal with the mechanic and quaking simultaneously, then it's bad. And that's why they removed it, and I like that. And Entangled definitely has the opportunity to do that as well. And I also don't think you can really play around Entangled in a very engaging way. You know what I mean? It's not like Bolstering or Sanguine or whatever, where you know this is happening and you can actively play around it. With Entangled, that's just not the case, because it seems to be like randomly appearing, so I cannot necessarily prepare for it unless there is a timer that we are unaware of just yet. If there's a timer, then you can technically prepare for it, but it still just happens instantly. So even if you have a timer, even if you know it's going to happen in 2 seconds, if there's another mechanic that happens simultaneously, let's say a swirly underneath your character that spawns at the exact same time as Entangling happens, then that's still something that you cannot necessarily play around well. So yeah, not the greatest affix in my opinion, but also not the worst. I wish there was a better heads up. They could also give us a heads up with an animation. So let's say maybe the vine spawns, like the root spawns, but it doesn't instantly attach your character to the vine. I think that would be better, because then you at least know what's happening and you can react better with any other surrounding abilities that happen from trash and from bosses, right? See, this is the vine that spawns, right? So if this thing, this animation would happen like 2 seconds or 3 seconds before it actually slows you and attaches you to the vine, then that would be better. Of course, the problem is then people could already walk away from it preemptively. But maybe it's just always the starting point that your character is in 2 seconds afterwards, and then you have to walk 10 yards. I don't know. Any sort of heads up. It could also just be an animation before the root spawns. I don't know. Just something to get a heads up so it's not so unintuitive. Because yeah, obviously we haven't tested these affixes enough, but I definitely think that there can be situations where this Entangled puts you in a very bad spot. All right, let's move on to the next affix that I tested. So I tested Afflicted. I think Afflicted is an affix that you can prepare for, you can play around, you can assign it properly, and it's like something that definitely changes a little bit of how you play the dungeon. So I think Afflicted is a pretty good affix. I think it's my favorite one from all of the changes that they did. I can almost never imagine a situation where this affix would put you in a situation where you cannot play around it if you have prepared for it, right? Like if you have everyone in your group that picked up Dispel, obviously not every class can, but a lot of classes can. If everyone, is just paying attention to them, I do think that 99% of the time you can do something about this without like being, screwed over by an affix with a boss mechanic or whatever. The only time this affix can be really annoying is, in my opinion, during boss fights. But during boss fights, there don't seem to be that many that spawn. The maximum amount that I've seen spawn from these mobs is like 3 to 4. And that's on trash pools, like if you do like a big trash pool or something like that. And usually I would say if you do a big trash pool, then usually the mobs don't do anything super scary to the group. So the healer usually has time to deal with them, because you wouldn't do a big trash pool if there's multiple mobs that actually do unavoidable group damage, right? Usually if there's a mob that does unavoidable group damage, you don't pull 10 mobs. You just pull like 3, 4 or whatever. So this is what it looks like when an Afflicted spawns. You see this kind of like spark, and then a few seconds later it will spawn, so you get a heads up, which is already good, right? You know that it's gonna happen. Then you can target the mob. It does have a nameplate as well, so if you have any kind of mouse over abilities that work on nameplates, then you can use it here. And they spawn with all debuffs. You can see Curse, Poison, and Disease. So any class that has a Dispel can dispel this Afflicted mob. So every single class that has a dispel can do it, because every class that can dispel can do one of these, right? Magic doesn't work. Magic dispel does not work, so you cannot do Mass Dispel or Arcane Torrent or whatever. But yeah, any hybrid dispeller can dispel this. Then you can also heal them to full HP to remove them. So in case you do not have a dispel ready, you can just heal them to full, which of course would be a healer job or a hybrid job, I guess, as well. You know, like a Shadow Priest or a Monk or a Shaman Druid, they could help. A Prot Paladin, of course, could help as well with World of Glories. So definitely not too bad. And then you target them, and you saw I just dispelled it here and it got removed. The only thing, in my opinion, that is a little bit annoying about these is that they're not in your frames, like not in your group or in your raid frame. And I personally am using click mouse overs that only work on frames. So I will have to change my keybinds for me to be able to dispel them. I use, for example, right click as a mouse over, as a friendly ability mouse over. But of course, right click is also attacking mobs. So I had to disable that right click mouse over for anything other than group frames and raid frames. And I also disabled it for my target frame, because my target frame if you right click it, it opens up a menu with like inspecting, trading, or whatever, right? So that right click mouse over that I have only works on frames. So it doesn't work on any of these mobs. So that means I have to change my bindings, which is definitely a little bit annoying for people that have click bindings and mouse click bindings. You will have to change them or do something about it so it works. But yeah, that's like the biggest issue I have with these, and it surely wouldn't really I don't think it will affect everyone. I don't think everyone has mouse over bindings, but yeah, that's one of the issues I have with them. Otherwise, it seems totally fine. They're up for 10 seconds, and the dispel cooldown is 8 seconds. So even if 2 of them spawn simultaneously, you can still dispel them both as a single dispeller without having to heal them, right? So one healer technically, or anyone, like a moonkin, could dispel 2 of them if they spawn simultaneously. If you just dispel one instantly, and then you spell the other one before it runs out. I did that right here, actually. I dispelled 2 of them right there. Now the third one went off, because of course I cannot deal with 3 of them as a single person. But yeah, it doesn't seem horrible. One of my favorite ones, because it kind of meets the criteria for a good affix, in my opinion. I know everyone has different opinions, and let me know what do you think about these affixes, of course, in the description below. But yeah, my criteria for a good affix are, it does change the way you have to play the dungeon a little bit. So something like Volcanic, for example, in my opinion, is not a good affix because it just doesn't affect you at all. It's like it's not an affix, basically. So it does have to change the way you play the dungeon a little bit, but it shouldn't affect you too much. And it should always, like, the affix should always be able to be played around without putting you in any kind of situation where you have to choose to fail a mechanic or fail the affix, right? Because I think there definitely are affixes like that where, okay, either you play the mechanic correctly from the boss or from the trash, or you play the affix correctly. You cannot do it both. And whenever that happens, I think that's just bad design on the affixes. I think Afflicted is kind of meeting that criteria where you will rarely, very rarely be in a situation where you have to choose between dealing with the affix or with the trash or the boss, because as I said, it can be dealt with multiple different ways. Hybrid classes can help you out. Even if you only have a healer that can dispel and no other player, then the healer can still heal them up. They don't have like an insane amount of HP, so you can still do that. Of course, the only time where you would really have a problem with it is if you're in a situation where the group takes a lot of damage, you only have the healer that can deal with them, no other hybrid class in the group, and there's multiple that spawn, right? Because then the healer has to focus on healing the group, and maybe even has to dispel like something in the group, and then they would also have to heal those afflicted mobs, which in combination would be almost not be able to deal with that. But yeah, I feel like that's a very rare situation to not have a single person that can somehow help with these afflicted mobs in your group at all. So Explosive is supposed to spawn less, but it has a lot of HP. And they nerfed the HP multiple times already ever since they released it initially, because it was ridiculous how much HP they had. They nerfed it already a little bit, but in my opinion, the biggest problem with them is that they spawn too frequently, in my opinion. Because you see, I'm playing 3 mobs here, and they just spawn back to back to back to back, basically. They don't spawn like 3 or 4 at a time. They definitely spawn one after the other. But as soon as I'm done with one explosive, or as soon as one of them goes off, another one spawns. And of course, I'm alone in this group here, right? If there was other people here, they would obviously be hitting them, and we would be able to deal with them quicker. But if you do like a really big pull, let's say you pull 10 mobs, and everyone has to constantly just deal with these explosives that spawn back to back to back to back, then it's gonna slow you down so much, because people won't be able to do AoE to the actual trash, right? You would just be killing one explosive, kill the next explosive, kill the next explosive, right? And this, you can see, they just spawn back to back to back to back to back, and that's, I think, just too much. It's too frequent. I don't think people are gonna be able to deal with these properly, especially because they have more HP. Now, obviously, again, I'm a tank here. So as a tank, obviously I'm going to do a little less damage to them than a damage dealer would, but this is only a plus 10 key, and they scale with key level. So if you do like a 27 key or whatever, you would need everyone to focus them, presumably, to kill them, and then another one spawns. So you never manage to AoE. I think they just have too much HP. I think they should nerf them a little bit. Either they nerf their HP or they make them attackable by AoE spells. I think if they actually would be attackable by AoE spells, then it's okay if they have more HP. Because then you just drag the trash pack to the explosives and you just cleave them down with the rest of the pack, right? I think then it would be fine, because then people do not lose damage on the trash pack and they just like they cleave off of the explosive onto the trash pack. It would still be a decent time loss in my opinion, because if there's any kind of priority target in a trash pack, like let's say you do a Ravager pull in Academy with explosive, people want to cleave off of the Ravager. They don't want to cleave off an explosive, right? But it would still be more, like it would still be better than what this is, in my opinion. And if they don't want it to be hit by cleave, then I think they just have to nerf the HP a little bit more. And I think it should also stop scaling eventually. Like I don't think it should scale infinitely, right? It shouldn't scale up until like plus 30 keys, because at some point it would just be in an exponential time loss the higher you go, which is a problem, because the higher key level you do, the more HP the trash and the bosses have as well. So if the explosives also have more HP, the higher you go, the more time you lose to deal with them. So that would make it really hard to do high keys whenever it's explosive. So I think they should stop scaling HP at some point, like maybe at 20. Maybe 20 should be like the highest it goes, and then it should stop scaling. Something like that, I don't know. But yeah, it definitely seems very difficult to deal with this affix right now, especially in like higher keys. All right, now we're gonna talk about Incorporeal. So the problem with Incorporeal is they spawn these beings here, and for 20 seconds they cast and stabilize. That is an 8 seconds cast. Once you interrupt the stabilize, they will immediately recast again until they disappear 20 seconds after. If the cast goes through, you get a 50% damage reduction. I didn't say that about Afflicted, but if you don't deal with Afflicted, it's like a big haste reduction if you don't deal with it. I personally like the fact that they are negative damage effects rather than negative like health effects or CC. Because we have a lot of affixes that if you fail them, they do damage to you, or if you fail them, they stun you or impact you in some other utility way. And I personally like it a lot more if failed affixes reduce the damage that you do, because that means you're not instantly gonna wipe, right? If you get a 50% damage and healing reduction, you're not instantly gonna wipe. It's gonna be a lot harder to survive, of course, because the tanks take 50% less healing, but I still think it's very doable to survive in comparison to like a stun or taking damage. With quaking, if multiple people hit each other, they would just one-shot. They would get one-shot and die, right? With thundering, you get stunned and take damage, and you will die as a result, very likely as well. So the fact that there's damage reductions, haste reductions, stuff like that, I think is good. It's definitely a better way of making people deal with these affixes, in my opinion, than taking damage or being stunned. Because I think damage dealers also have like a bigger incentive to deal with them, because who wants a 50% damage reduction as a damage dealer, right? So I think it really pushes the damage dealers and the groups to deal with them. And simultaneously, if you somehow manage to not deal with them, you're still don't instantly gonna wipe. One more thing I do want to mention about Afflicted that I didn't mention before is that Afflicted and Incorporeal can be line of sighted and outranged. So if you do not manage to deal with Afflicted, because there's too many that spawn, you're out of whatever, or you do not manage to deal with Incorporeal, you can outrange it, it's 60 yards, or you can line of sight the cast and you won't get hit by it, the exact same way as Explosive works. Explosive is also 60 yards and line of sightable. Now, let's talk about Incorporeal again. So they're up for 20 seconds, they're stationary, they spawn close to the trash, not on top of the trash, they are immune to AoE CC, but they are CCable through every single target CC. So you can interrupt them with any interrupt. You can CC them with any type of CC. So you can CC them with Shackle Undead, Hibernate, Banish, Imprison, Blind. Like every single target CC will work. Root does not work, because rooting is not interrupting them, like not disorienting. You cannot displace them, so Typhoon doesn't work, Grip doesn't work, and you cannot like mind control them. So you cannot do control undead or mind control from a priest, but anything else works. So as a druid, for example, I have many things to deal with this. I can interrupt it, I can hibernate it, I can cyclone it, I can pick up bash to interrupt them with a stun, and I think that might be it. But yeah, you have a lot of ways to deal with them. They also kind of act like explosives in the way that they are immune to AoE abilities. So if you're standing next to an incorporeal being and they are CC'd, like sheeped or hexed or hibernated or whatever, then they will not break to AoE spells. They will not break to Starfall, they will not break to Thresh, they will not break to Divine Storm. You know, all of these spells will not hit them the same way as they do not hit explosives. The problem, though, is that they are not completely immune to damage abilities. So, for example, if you play Guardian Druid with Galactic Guardian or whatever it's called, or if you play Moonkin, for example, with Twin Moons, then if I Moonfire this mob and the incorporeal being is not CC'd yet, then my Moonfire will jump on this incorporeal being and it will break the CC that is on it. Now, they take 99% reduced damage, so some of the CCs will not break. For example, if you hex the target, hex does not break on any sort of damage. It only breaks if it does a decent amount of damage to them. Same with like roots. But something like a hibernate breaks on any type of damage, even if it's just 1 damage. So if there's a Moonfire or any kind of dot on it, then it will break the hibernate. You can see it right here. It literally happened right here. So this at spawns, I Moonfired this Enforcer and it proc the Moonfire on the ad. You can see it only ticks for 65 damage, 33 damage, but you can see it breaks my hibernate. The hibernate still interrupts, that is stabilized, but then it breaks and then I have to cast it again, which is annoying. I wish they would maybe stop that from happening, because I think that this will also cause issues with any kind of procs. So if, for example, the rings that we have in 10.0.7 that have random damage procs, or for example, pets that do random damage, or let's say you're convoking as a Moonkin, you might be hitting these incorporeal beings with your spells, right? So the fact that they are attackable might cause issues with these kind of abilities that classes have that do random damage, right? Any kind of random proc, random damage or whatever might go on these incorporeal beings when they're not CC'd, and it costs you, it basically just means that you will lose a lot of damage on the trash because you're not hitting the trash, you're hitting these ads. Another issue, in my opinion, is that they're stationary and they last for 20 seconds no matter what. For example, right here, I'm about to finish off this Enforcer, but this incorporeal being spawns now. So when I finish this Enforcer, I am still going to be in combat with this incorporeal being for the whole duration of the buff, right? So I cannot mount up, I cannot rest if someone has died, I cannot rest them, and I'm just sitting there waiting, right? I cannot move on either, because if I move on, this incorporeal being in the back might still cast, unless you have some sort of heart to see on it. So you can see I'm still in combat here, the trash is dead, I'm just waiting, basically like sitting around doing nothing until it's gone. So that's something that is like, I wish they would just be removed as soon as you kill off all of the trash. So once you're not in combat with trash anymore, I think they should just be gone, because otherwise it slows you down even further than what it already slows you down, right? Because Spiteful, for example, slows you down as well whenever you're done with the trash, but that's the only thing that it does. It doesn't also slow you down during the trash pull, right? But these incorporeal beings, they slow you down during the trash pull because you have to CC them. And then they slow you down at the end of a trash pull too, because you have to wait until you leave combat with them or before you can rest and so on. So maybe them being removed once you're done with the trash would be nice. Then additionally, another thing that is that they're stationary, right? So if I want to do a big pull, I start at the start of the dungeon, I pick up trash there, I walk all the way down here, pick up more trash. The problem is they could spawn on the way. So what if an incorporeal ad spawns all the way at the entrance where we started pulling, but then we wanted to end up here? So now we have incorporeal beings that are at the back of dungeon, and I have to like go back and forth to see them unless we can line of sight them somewhere. Again, it's line of sightable and outrangeable. So, you know, it is most of the time probably possible to outrange it if that happens, or to line of sight it, but sometimes it just can be annoying. And yeah, I think those are my biggest issues with Incorporeal. So it's not absolutely horrible, but I do think that it's a little bit too much effort that you have to put into them right now. That's my biggest gripe, because it's somehow similar to Afflicted, except that these beings have to constantly be paid attention to, right? I constantly have to think, oh, I hibernated this, but now the hibernate broke, so I have to hibernate again. I have to cyclone this thing in the back. I have to interrupt this. Like, you constantly have to think about this. While with Afflicted, you see one of them spawn, you dispel it. It's gone, right? But with these guys, because they constantly cast, you constantly have to think about them. And I think it's a little bit too much effort that you have to put into them for a weekly affix, in my opinion. Maybe if you would just have them be removed as soon as you see them once, maybe it would be better. Like, if I could just say an Incorporeal being spawns, I cast Hibernate on it, and it's removed. Maybe that would be better. And yeah, that seems a little bit easy-ish, but I don't think it is, right? Because if you do a big pool and there's many of them that spawn, I think switching to them and hard to seeing them is a decent time investment for anyone, really. So I do think that just seeing them once might be good enough of an affix, you know, without it being too easy or it being too hard. The only issue with that is that it might turn into a healer affix. If all of the ads only have to be CC'd one time for them to be removed, it might just be like a healer job, right? Where you say, oh, you're the healer, just hibernate them all, or just cyclone them all, or whatever other healers have that has no CD, like just Jekyll undead them all, you know, stuff like that. Yeah, so that's the issue, I guess, with it being removed if you CC them once, because the way they work right now, everyone has to help CCing them, because a healer obviously cannot CC multiple of them for 20 seconds, right? So right now it's a job for everyone, but yeah, I think it's a little bit too much effort right now. And additionally, there's the issues of them absorbing damage, being able to get dotted, stopping CCs with the dots, and them keeping you in combat. So this, in my opinion, is the worst affix. Some people say that explosive is the worst affix change, but I think the problem with explosive is just that it has too much HP and it spawns too frequently. So I think, yeah, explosive sucks right now, but I think it can be really easily fixed by Blizzard. They can literally just say, oh, well, we're gonna turn down the spawn range so it doesn't spawn that often, or we're gonna lower the HP of them, blah, right? It's like, it's done. It's not like a big thing. But the thing with Incorporeal, in my opinion, is that they need like a little bit of a bigger change or a bigger rework for it to not be so annoying. So that's why I'm more worried about Incorporeal than I'm worried about Explosive, because Explosive just needs number changes, while this, in my opinion, needs a little bit of more changes for it to not be very difficult. This could be a very difficult affix to deal with. All right, well, that was a little bit of a long video, but I wanted to give you like all of the information and my opinions on it. And it's always good to give feedback. Of course, this is like the very first iteration of these affixes, keep that in mind. Make sure you tell me your opinions and your feedback in the description below about these affixes. Please try to be as constructive as possible, because giving constructive feedback, I think, definitely helps. They've been pretty good at listening to feedback, in my opinion, in Dragonflight so far. So if we give constructive criticism about these affixes, I am very hopeful that they will change it and they will adjust them to what we are that we're asking for. So any kind of feedback where it's like, remove all of these new affixes, they're all bad, you know, it's not necessarily going to help. So let's just accept that we have these affixes now and think about ways, or think about the things that annoys you the most about them and give constructive feedback. Like, what's the most annoying thing to you about Entangled? Do you play a class that cannot get rid of them? Do you hate the fact that it's random? Do you hate the fact that they're hard to see? What about Afflicted? Do you hate the fact that they have no frames? Would you like them to be dispelled by magic? Like, what's the issue with these affixes? Think about it and give me your best feedback. I would really appreciate that. Obviously, I don't work for Blizzard, but it's always nice to see different kinds of opinions, as long as they're constructive opinions and not just some, like, you know what I mean. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. I'm gonna continue to test these affixes on PTR, and I'm gonna see if there's other issues and other problems with them, and I'm gonna make sure I'll give as much feedback as possible so we can get those affixes changed in a way that they're not going to be incredibly annoying, because I'm looking forward to Season 2, and plus all of the dungeons that they announced, the old dungeons especially, seem really cool. Really excited for Freehold especially. So yeah, I'm excited, and let's hope that these affixes are going to be changed into an affix that is playable, you know, that is not absolutely horrible. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you very much. Remember to like the video as well if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and check out my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/Naguura for any more questions or information. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.